Joining me now on the panel is Liberal MP Sarah Henderson from Corangamite, which is just outside of Geelong, Labor backbencher Michael Danby, who's the member for Melbourne Ports, which is inner city Melbourne, and Liberal Senator for Victoria, which is everywhere, James Patterson. Welcome, everyone. We talk about bipartisanship in so many areas. I've seen it work very closely on Indigenous issues, and I've seen it firsthand on big national security issues when I worked for the Prime Minister. Why can't we have some level of bipartisanship in relation to energy that isn't where Labor is always drifted hard to, which is emissions reduction, and less about reliability and renewable and price? Can we get all three to work in some sort of concert so that, you know, we're not turning policy making on its head every time the government changes?
You'd hope that that would be the case. Reliability has its place, affordability has its place. New technologies are eventually going to become cheaper, but I do accept your point that they're not fixing the situation produced by coal at the moment. Now, I don't know whether either of our two Liberal friends are members of the Monash group, but I heard you and Sam talking beforehand. Sarah's wrong. Hazel went offline because the Labor Party in Victoria accepts market forces. I'm surprised that a Prime Minister of Australia would suggest that perhaps the government could make an encouragement to a private company to keep another power station in New South Wales going. This is all becoming very confused, Peter. I know people who support Donald Trump are soft on the Russians now, but I've never heard of conservatives in the Liberal National Party government saying there should be state subsidies to keep power stations open in New South Wales. We should all, I thought we'd all accepted market economics with the caveat of environmental safeguards.
Yeah, but hang on, no one's saying
so when you have an essential commodity like electricity, like gas, I do think we need a strong regulatory framework, because it's intolerable to see some of the gouging and some of the conduct in the market that we have seen. But more broadly...
But Peter, should the Prime Minister be on the phone to one private company suggesting that they make a bid for a company that he doesn't like, and should the Monash faction or group, or whoever they are, be suggesting that there be government intervention to subsidise what they call new high technology coal plants?
Was this idea that the RBA should be getting into mortgages, and I remember under Joe Hockey we had to recapitalise the RBA with significant billions of dollars out of the Commonwealth purse to give it the strength it needed. That seems to me to be socialism on steroids, but also this idea that everyone, regardless of their income, without a means test, every Australian should get a universal wage paid to them, even if they're working, plus access to healthcare and education and all of these other things. Now, how does that work? Who's going to pay for this universal wage, Michael Danby?
Well, look, the Greens clearly are playing internal politics so that Di Natale can get support from the more radical New South Wales branch in order to keep his job after their failure in Batman. But it's madness, this idea that the Reserve Bank have fixed interest rates of 3% and lend out to people directly, and that we have an underlying non-means tested wage for every person in Australia. This is cloud cuckoo land stuff. And you know, I think the issue of housing affordability is something for our young people and our young families all around Australia. But I think a more realistic, courageous stance, you may disagree with it, is Shorten's abolishing negative gearing apart from the first home. So, you know, crazy green stuff, reasonable alternative, and the government sticking where they are. They're the three alternatives Australians face.
Before we get into some questions from viewers, Michael Danby, I want to just go to you. It's come to my attention that just in and around the Jewish holiday of Passover, the ABC really disgraced itself. It had a British vicar on for an interview. This British vicar has been accused of anti-Semitism and of spreading anti-Israel conspiracy theories. He's from cloud cuckoo land. He has really no place in the mainstream media, and yet he was all over the ABC, and the ABC doesn't think there's anything wrong with it.
the Anglican Church in the United Kingdom is not exactly, from watching the Vicar of Dimbley, the hardest line organisation in the world. They've dumped him. They don't allow him to broadcast on political matters, and they've taken away his official status. But he gets a 9/11 truther, a person who says that 9/11 was a conspiracy to, embarrass the poor jihadists. He gets a leg up on the ABC. I'll tell you what they should have run, Peter. In Paris, an 85-year-old survivor of the Holocaust was stabbed to death by a jihadist, and the entire French political elite from both the left and the right were in the streets demonstrating how horrible that is. And in Britain, the Jewish community, which is very, very timorous, is demonstrating outside Westminster against Jeremy Corbyn under the slogan "Enough is enough," because he associated himself with a terrible image of Jewish bankers that would have been, out of something that could have been published in the Sturm. So, ABC, lift your game. Come on, Australians are more cosmopolitan and responsible on that. Don't pick obscure Anglican vicars. Get someone to talk about mainstream issues, which are on the front page of The Guardian even, and Le Monde.
Michael Danby, you've got a bit of a record of standing up to thugs inside the Labor Party. Surely you would think that this smells like a rat when money has gone directly into the pocket of the party activists, the campaigners, and they're not there for the use of ministerial or backbench staff. And of course, there's no truer evidence of this thing being crook than a government then spending $1 million all the way to the High Court to keep it out of the public domain.
Peter, I hope I heard you right, saying I've got a record of standing up against
yes,
thugs
standing up against thugs inside the
any
Labor
side
Party.
of politics. But
yes.
Look, I am against criminalising of our political differences. These things were reported on by Deborah Glass in a very effective way, in a system supported by both sides, and people pay political consequences for these kinds of activities. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not condemning Daniel Andrews. I think in the area of infrastructure and in many others, it's been a very good government from the point of view of public transport and all of the issues that I care about as well. But the voters of Victoria have a choice, and that is how our differences should be solved in politics, not by, after the fact, going and taking people to court. I'm against that, Peter. I think criminalising of political differences is the wrong way to go.
Michael, theft is criminal, right? If I walked into your office and took $400,000 out of one of your bank accounts, you'd throw me in front of the police and straight away I'd be in front of the courts. Now, why is it any different for a politician, in this case a political party, to take $400,000 away from taxpayers and then spend another $1 million hoping the taxpayers won't find out about it?
Well, I'm not going to defend it, Peter. I mean, I've always thought state politics was the B team. I'm sorry to be blunt with you, but
you've just gone up to my estimation for saying you will not defend it, Michael Danby.
The point is that Victorian voters will get a chance to make a decision about this on at the election, which is due in November. And Peter, the other thing too is, there's a great film with De Niro in it called City Heat, where a city official makes constant decisions, and sometimes you don't know where crossing the line is. I mean, these people were doing political work. They were every upper house member had a half position, and they were amalgamated together to work on marginal seat campaigns. I suspect if they'd actually stayed in their own offices, they wouldn't have been doing all that much different from what they actually did without getting people so upset and Deborah Glass so upset.